Again, it's not a competition, obviously. Everybody have a different levels of experience. This is much better. This is pretty much very close to being perfect. Just a few small points. Few things to point out first. In the future, when you guys post your drawings, just make sure you adjust the brightness and contrast such that it looks very similar to what you have on paper. And this one's really good. The only thing is this part here should be a little bit darker. I would say down here, but it's really close already. But other than that, in terms of shape, in terms of value, it's very close. It's like 90% there. I want to point out another one because you can see very easily now that I'm putting everything side by side. This area here, I like that you have the correct value here actually, and you have everything almost correct. The only thing that you need to really fix, right, is just this area here. All the values here as it transitions looks good. You can just look it through and compare it to the reference, compare to other people's drawings, and evaluate it, or ask other people to give their honest and sincere evaluation. I don't have a reference here. I really like the tone value consistency. However, you see all these lines on the side? Chances are you're not going to see them on the reference. I do like how round it is. I hope you did this without aid. The gradient is all good. You have to get the right gradient. And make sure that you actually, as a beginner, draw what you see. Which means if there's an outline somewhere that doesn't exist, only exists in your mind, there should not exist in the final drawing. A lot of you, there's something very attractive about wanting to just dive into the more difficult drawings and more difficult references. But unless you can do the dog, the panda, the egg, the spider, unless you can do those two near, I wouldn't say near perfection, but at least like above 80%, you shouldn't spend too much time doing portrait because you're aiming too high too fast. This is a very good example of a spider. And again, when you posted an image, adjust it so that it truly reflects what you see on the paper. Because I very much doubt you're drawing this on the yellow paper. I did mention the better your drawing is, the more I'm gonna be critical about everything. So there's a little bit of proportion that I'm gonna point out. For example, if you look at the angle here, on the reference, the angle is sharper. It's like here. Or should I say it's more like this. You can see it now that I pointed out. In terms of shadows, this part here are difficult. And it doesn't really make sense in the image, I understand. But if you want to create that kind of blurriness, it's got to be a little bit more blurry. Overall, great job with the spider. Check out the angle between this leg. Your angle is here. Look at the reference. The reference is like that. So that kind of precision is what you need to keep improving on. Everything else is overall good. Good observation. So you are on the right track. A lot of people are having similar issues with the dog. I like the proportions, but where on the reference do you see a line here, for example, or a line here, or a line right here on top of the nose? There are certainly lines exist in the drawings, but if they don't exist in the reference, or they exist very faintly, like faint in the reference, don't have the final drawing be like that. This is very easy to evaluate once you understand the concept, because one of the most important thing I mentioned is that in real life, most of the lines you perceive are simply the difference between two totally different values. So there's the lines, it just doesn't really exist as a line by itself. Another thing I want to point out is that you should again go over my tone value module. There is a section for gradient. By the way, anybody else want to join the class, it's completely free. Anybody's welcome to join. All you have to do is make an account. So you would go to classrooms, which is right here, and check out the tone value module and the tone value hierarchy of importance, as well as value transition differences. All these videos are very short. However, for you to practice and get really good at, it's going to take some time. For example, like it goes from dark to light immediately. But if you look at the reference, it's actually very smooth transitional value. And there is some certain difficult part, such as almost like a clay, right? This kind of lines and grooves in the reference. These are put there that you don't have to draw them. They are details, but always first get the large values correct. Just look at all values and get all those correct, and then if you want to add details, do it afterwards. This one I really like. I like the principle and the idea behind it. proportion is good. The value is a little bit off, but I really like the fact that I can tell that this artist is not doesn't have like years or years of experience, right? But because they watched my videos and they actually used this gradient tool on the side, that they actually got the value much more accurate than you can do it otherwise. But here's a few things to note. That's too light, right? And you can see how overall dark everything is on this panda. Like that's completely black. Almost same thing with this part, but more specifically like here, right? It's just little things like that all over the place. And look around here. I don't want to keep doing circle. Let me say here. This whole arm needs to be darker. Even though I think you did a good job in terms of gradient smoothness. One thing you guys can actually do is blur out your image or squint a little bit when you look at your image. Then you can see the overall value, and then you will see that, oh, this part here in the reference is mostly like black. Right on the bottom is mostly like very much black with just a few of the highlights, and a few areas is a little bit lighter. And if you do it with that in mind, then your joints will not be as flat. But it's also another issue I can point out is that this joint might not even be an issue with the artist's ability to draw dark tones. It might just be the tools they're using. I don't know if that's charcoal pencil or graphite. I can't tell. But if it's charcoal, you should be able to. This should be extremely dark. Look at the difference between that and the value you have put down. This one, you can tell that obviously the line work is very, very accurate in terms of proportions, but I can also tell because it's to somebody who knows, to somebody who is more experienced, I can tell immediately that you probably use some kind of aid. This is not done freehand. I'm 99%, unless you're even more accurate than I am, I'm 99% sure that this is done with some kind of aid. Which is okay if you just want to practice tone value. But when you do this with aid and you skip certain aspect of the drawing, this is what can happen. Again, don't take offense to any criticism. You see, when you do some kind of aid drawing, and then you draw and more like freestyle, and you can see that there's a fairly noticeable issues with the drawing. Now I'm actually going to some of the portrait, but before that, just one more thing here. Again, this is for evaluation, so don't worry too much about it. If you did this before you watched my videos, I'm just using this to demonstrate the point again. In the reference, you don't see those lines, right? All these lines. If you don't see them, they are simply concepts in your mind. You can use them to establish the boundaries, but when you actually do the tones and everything, if it's not there on the reference, it shouldn't be there obviously in the drawing. So a lot of you, this is for for evaluation, and I put this on there just to see, not for everybody to strive towards immediately, just to see if there are any outliers in the class. It's not for you to aim at and try to strive to get a really good drawing out immediately, because I understand it's very attractive to do the portrait. Like this one is very nice looking drawing, and this is what I would call right between very nice tones, right? Very smooth, but it's right between almost like realistic and flat, because the value here, and there's a lot of values that would, for example, if you look on the reference, the value here is very, it's not very, but it's dark here, right? And then it goes lighter, but this part here is much darker. And then this part here is actually the brightest. But on your drawing, there's no difference. Hence, it feels flat. Proportions are actually not too bad. I can point out, I can nitpick on the proportions. Again, if you can't get the proportions, for example, on the dog or the spider very much correct, you can do the portraits as a side thing. It should be symmetrical, right? So, however you did this, the right side is much better, but the left side is not symmetrical. Now that I point things out, so yeah, tone values and simply fine-tune the proportions. focus on large picture. A very good value control. Just have to get them correct. Lack of dark tones is one of the most common problems I see. I have rarely seen a drawing from a beginner where the issue is that made the face too dark. It's always too light, not too dark. This one I want to point out and as an example, and the person who drew this, the artist, correctly noticed himself that obviously this eye is off, right? This eye is a little bit too big, but more importantly, obvious now that you see it's so obvious, the issue with this and the reason behind this, as the person correctly surmised in his post, that he did not take a break. He, especially as a beginner, he did this in one go, and when you stare at the same picture for hours on end, there could be a giant error such as this that you simply don't notice unless you take a break and have that fresh point of view. And someone mentioned that you can either take a break and for hours or days have a look at the next morning, or have a different point of view by using a cell phone. Look at the image through a cell phone picture or through the cell phone's live cam, or as I have suggested, put a mirror right next to it and look through the mirror, especially when there's something you draw is very, very symmetrical. Then you can see immediately, oh wow, it's something's off. That's a good point for everybody. Like even I have to take a break here and there if I'm spending too long on a drawing, just so I can have that fresh perspective. Here's the drawing, a few drawings where if you are at this level, you can devote a bit more time to portraits. I don't know the reference. This is obviously not based on one of my references. I can tell by the way it is done. This person probably learned a lot of techniques from my either just by happenstance, but probably likely from my time-lapse videos. So this person learned how to draw, just pick up some things from my time-lapse videos, which is extremely good. In terms of tone value, very good. Like this face is realistic. As you can see, you really don't need that much details, because if you zoom in, there is not much details in the eyes. In fact, it's kind of very rough. But if you get the overall values right, as you can see, if I'm zooming out a little bit, it looks very good. Again, I don't know the reference, but so I can't critique on the proportion too much. And for most of you whose value control is not quite at this level yet, start with something, just stick with something simple, relatively simple. This is another one of the joints where if you can get to this level already, you are very much able to just doing portraits, practice portraits on the side. However, you can still benefit from the exercises, because I see some proportional issues. Like I mentioned, the better your drawing is, the more I'm be critical. Because that drawing is symmetrical, right? So if you look at this eye, it should go up a little bit. And this eye should be a little bit smaller. Because if you draw a line like that, the bottom of the line should be equal, not cut through. The bottom of one eye should not cut through the other eye. And the nose, this is a little bit too straight. It should curve in a little bit more. If you look at the reference. Nostrils, this one's bigger, this one's smaller. And the entire lips should be just a little bit smaller. This is somebody that I can just keep, you're welcome to just keep doing portraits. There's little things like just add a little bit of one highlight line there, but I like the style you're doing. However, it's good that you guys are doing your own style and creating your own signature art, right? But there are some principles you guys need to understand with portrait that can probably help you before you do something like that. Again, this is not supposed to be what I'm teaching in the class here. For example, when you do hair, if you just simply do the hair, add some more dynamic form to the hair as it comes out. A little bit of bright part for the ear. I'm doing this really, really fast. And then on this side, it's alright if that's your style. Just maybe you can use a little bit of light, just a little bit of very, very light. Because when you do this kind of style, the goal is still to depict the form somewhat. You can do it very, very light and have these lines not be so rigid. See, it comes down, it's very, very rigid. Have it flow. Have some kind of flow that goes into it. So yeah, let me see if I can return to the beginning before I did all the changes. Okay, yeah. Yeah, so don't have something, especially when you draw hair, don't have something that's very, because you can obviously do very flowy lines, I can tell. Just work on the proportions more. The reference is completely symmetrical, right? So this line here, the corner of the eye to corner of the eye should be a totally horizontal line, not at an angle. So you would still benefit a lot from doing the simpler drawings. This is another portrait that is really cool. The style seems very similar. So when I do it, you can see again that's at an angle, right? The nose. This is why portraiture is much more difficult. The nose, it's almost like you're seeing too much. The angle of the nose is almost like it's tilted too far up. I know it looks, in the reference, it looks kind of like that, but that little bit of difference. So you should bring the angle of the nose down so it's not so like high. You know, you can see the nostrils and like that. It should be a little bit lower. Again, you have to have a better understanding of form and things like that. Now at this level, I am able to give you feedback and you benefit a lot from the feedbacks as you do portraits. See, now the hair is more flowy, but you can see just by doing that, it just feels a lot nicer. The hair is not as rigid and not as stiff. And I like the style, but don't do style for style's sake. Get everything else correct and your style will naturally come out, because style wise you're doing something like a master would do. But proportion, tone value, the structure of the face, there are still ways to improve. So there's an imbalance there. Like the spider. This is another one. Very nice drawing of the spider. Okay, let me see if I can immediately see any proportion related. If you look at the head of the spider here, right? It's almost like it's directly, fully looking at us. Like it's extremely symmetrical. If you look at the drawing, however, it's more like it's tilted in the drawing. You see? And this is one of the thing, and this is the other thing. So on the drawing it's tilted at an angle, and in your drawing it's a little bit smaller, and it's much more straight on facing us. Legs, there's always some small issue that I point out. For example, this line here should be a little bit longer, and then this leg here would then be longer. Cause look at this triangle here. And then look at the triangle on the reference, right? If I put the triangle on the reference over, if I were to reproduce that over, I'll put the grain line on top. It's something like this. You see how everything's kind of tilted in some way. You can see also, just based on observation, you guys can see this very easily. Look at this shape here. And then look at this shape. See how skinny the one on the reference is, and then look how different that is. Right? The blurry stuff is, we tend to make things much more clearer than what is actually there. That's kind of a general thing most people would do. On the reference, it's much more subtle and it's a lot more blurry. Here's another one that's very obvious once I point out. Look at this leg here. You see this shape here? So this angle here, where is that on the reference? If it's not there, this entire triangle, it doesn't exist on the reference. So learn to look at things and have that ability to immediately identify errors is something that you guys can work toward, and it's something you will get better over time. I think I covered a few of the ones that I do want to cover. I can briefly just go over the ones that I see in the post you're drawing image. Like the hair one, this is the latest one. Very good. You just have to use the tools correctly. The lines there, if you're aiming to get the lines to be a little bit more defined, you should use very sharp hot rubber eraser with a very sharp edge, and the charcoal should be softer. Overall, good. I can point out a bunch of things, but this is the great direction, and you are not drawing, like, there's no sharp lines that I can see, right? So you are moving towards realism. A lot of pandas, everybody likes pandas. Good. Again, some of the values differences here between the foot and the side can be worked on. Just pay more attention. Same thing with the ears and so on. Like if you look at the panda here, see how dark the bottom half is compared to the head. And here, the part here on the bottom, see how light it is, relatively speaking? Again, I almost never see a beginner's drawing, or should I say even like an experienced artist's drawing, is too dark. It's always too light. This elephant is for, based on one of my studies, and this person mentioned that it's just for proportion practice, and it's very good. Good, but clearly you can see that the entire head and everything is tilted at a different angle. For example, the left eye, the right eye, which one's higher? That should be, now that I point out, it should be very obvious which one's higher, which one's lower. These large features should be of the uttermost, they're most important. And even though the joints that I have tiny little details because they're like based on sculptures, right? You don't have to worry about those unless you get the large areas and all the values in a large form correct, and then go into the details. This dog is very good. The nose is a little bit too long, as you can see from the image, so I'll bring the entire nose in a little bit. But yeah, overall you're on the right track for sure. Any of these I can always just pinpoint 20 errors for every single drawing. I don't say this to discourage anybody, but you are all like work on your own timeline, your own experience, and as long as you are improving relative to yourself, it's great. Gray Sapphire, no outlines, realistic. The value is a little bit off, especially with the rebound value. So look at the reference, look carefully at the rebound value. This part here is too bright. This is a common issue, rebound area versus the brightest area, because you are put down the values relating to its surroundings. So you're falling to the illusion or optical illusion. So you're falling to the illusion or optical illusion. Check out my videos again on tone values, and so that you always compare any value you see to a common value. Then you don't have this kind of issue on having the secondary rebound light areas too bright. That's a very common thing. So I don't want to go too far back, because those would be the ones that was before my videos are done. Overall, great job guys. Give each other feedbacks, let each other, especially critiques and so on, because those are actually more helpful at this point. You don't have to worry about hurting each other's feelings, or you should not worry about hurting each other's feelings, as long as the critiques are, genuine, and you're doing it out of good faith and all that. Honestly, as you can see in my classroom, I think I just finished all the techniques, most of the techniques that you need. So the tone value, proportions, and joint techniques, as well as the essential tools. These are the main knowledge that you need to know in order to keep practicing and getting better. If you ever want to improve on certain areas that you feel like you're lacking, just watch the videos again. They are very, very short. And once again, anybody else who is watching this video and does not know about this, feel free to join. I will leave a link in the descriptions, or you can just go to this link above, school.com/artfree/about, and click on join group on the bottom right, and then you can join the community, and you have access to every video that I make completely free. Okay, I will post more drawings for you to practice on, but you are also, this is important, to practice on your own via your own reference image. When you do that and you make a post in communities, right, under communities, and post my drawings, which is right here, post drawing. When you do that, and if you choose your own reference, include the reference also, so other people can more correctly evaluate it. And also make sure you adjust the contrast and brightness more accurate to what you actually see regarding your drawing. Alright guys, overall great job, and don't compare yourself to others. You don't know how long they've been doing their drawings. Work from the simple drawings to the more complicated drawings, because if you cannot draw a cube or an egg or a sphere, dog, panda, as I'm progressing to more and more difficult spider, if you cannot do those to a very high accuracy level, don't spend too much time doing portraits. I know people like to dive into that. Okay, I'll try to make more videos like this when I have a chance. Until then, talk to you guys later. Good job.